Today is Tuesday, November 17th, 2009. My name is Julian Reitman, and it's my pleasure today to interview Dan Roberts at his home in Stamford as part of the Oral History Archive of the Jewish Historical Society of Lower Fairfield County. Good morning, Dan.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Now,
lady and gentleman.
And the question we start with is, have you thought of something in particular that you wanted to get started with?
Not really. My mind has been so occupied.
Good.
Okay.
In that case,
Okay.
I will start.
Because I really don't know the whole sequence of all of this.
Well, I
And the
was going,
information to what degree you want it, so I'll leave it up to you to ask the questions.
I will then start with, why did you come to Stamford?
I came to Stamford in in July 1966, because I had purchased a new franchise from Robert Half Personnel to open an office in Stamford, Connecticut. And so at that point in time, I commuted from Long Island for a year with great difficulty. If the weather was bad, it took too long to get here. I'm out back home, so some nights I just spent at the old hotel downtown, and tried to get the company started in a little 500 square foot office at the old State National Bank building on Atlantic Street. At the same time, I was in the evening when I went home, I was president at that point in time of the Reformed congregation in Merrick, Long Island. I have to remember, in Merrick, Long Island. So I had the meetings there. I had to run here, and it was getting rather difficult. And so after 1 year, my wife says to me, you know, if you keep up like this, you're going to fall on your face. So we decided to move up to Stamford, and over a weekend, after seeing an ad in the Times, we bought a house on I can't remember, in Stamford, for about, I forget, $45,000 or $46,000, and ran back and forth to Merrick to show our house there. It took quite a while, and we sold that for about $33,000. However, because of the difference in tax rates, the cost of living was about the same. And so then we started our business here, and I just kept it growing for 26 years.
And did you consider the Jewish community in moving to Stamford?
No, I did not at that point in time. I was looking around to see where can I open an office, and this was the place. And I drove up here. I'd never been to this part of Connecticut before. But after finding a small space at the bank building downtown, I then decided, what does this city look like? And so I just took the car and ran north of the Parkway, and I said, boy, this is beautiful. I see the little lanes, the streets, and the lakes, and the trees. I said, this is the place to raise a family, and that sealed it. I decided, yes, I signed the agreement with Robert Half in June of 1966. I opened the office a month later by myself, and then a year later we moved the whole family up here. So I knew nothing about the Jewish community. I didn't know there was a Jewish community at that point in time.
Okay. So then let's get back. You mentioned that you were active in the Reform in Merrick.
Yes.
How do you look back in your Jewish heritage?
Well, that is a good question, because my parents both came from, call it Ukraine, one area or the other, Bessarabia, whatever. Because my mother came here at the age of 4, my father came here at the age of around 17 or 18, because his father said, we got to get you and your brother out of here fast, because the Tsar was still in power, and they're looking to draft everybody they could grab, and so out you go. And they came to the United States, my father and my Uncle Phil, and my father never saw his family again until we found them in 1982, 1972, 82, I forget when. So we moved here. We lived, I primarily grew up in Brooklyn, in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, and they had no religion at all, except they said, you know, you gotta be bar mitzvahed. Oh, I had to find out what that was all about. And all my friends were Jewish, and we are still, 3 of us are still alive. So there was a Orthodox synagogue a couple of blocks away, and they went over there and found out what I had to do to be bar mitzvahed. And they found, living in a small apartment over a nearby grocery store, was an old rabbi and his wife. So I went every day, or however it was, up the steps to see him. We sat in the hallway with his garlic breath, and he says, "Here, I want you to repeat after me," in his accent. And so finally I memorized everything he told me. And then we had my bar mitzvah at the synagogue around the corner, the shul. We had my bar mitzvah then, the party for my relatives, where we were very fortunate that my mother's family and my father's all lived in Brooklyn, and so we're very close to each other, saw each other all the time. So my great big party was in my dining room, not very big. And my mother got here, and my grandmother got here because my grandmother's brother had already been in the United States and sent them the money to get out. And he had a little restaurant or restaurant business of some sort. I think it was called Busy Bee, if I recall, I'm not sure. And so I got my biggest present from him, from my bar mitzvah, which was a $10 bill. And that was my introduction there. So in effect, I never went to temple or anything after all those years. As far as being further introduced into Judaism, after I got married, Betty and I got married and lived in
Well, before we jump that far,
okay.
Was there any evidence of anti-Semitism in Bensonhurst?
A little bit, a little bit. My friends one was Irish, my other good friends were Italian, and all the rest were Jewish. So that I didn't know about anti-Semitism, except there were a few instances when on the high holidays, we would all take a walk onto, it's an area where the Belt Parkway is now, there's a park off Bay Parkway, and as we were walking, we were sort of attacked. And that was the experience I had there. And also, of course, Mr. Father Coughlin was on the radio with all his anti-Semitic commentary and whatever. So yes, we knew about anti-Semitism, and it's only a couple of instances where I ran into it at that stage in my life. I never had this in school at all. My public school, 97, and my junior high school weren't too far away. Then I went to Brooklyn Tech. I had no anti-Semitism because a hell of a lot of Jews went to Brooklyn Tech at that point in time. So then, no, I didn't have much in the way of exposure to it, except by that incident and hearing about it. And knowing why my parents got me out of Russia.
Right.
They moved out of Russia.
And when you finished Brooklyn Tech, what happened?
Well, I was then 17 and a half years old. I graduated in January 1943 and got a job as a draftsman at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. How I got the job, I don't know, I don't remember, but I was lucky I got a job with the Navy Yard and in a design department. And while I was there, I heard about the ASTP, Army Specialized Training Program. And here was an opportunity at that point in time, from what I understood, to get to college. Wonderful, otherwise I'd never get to college. Nobody can afford that. Not, we only lived at that point in a 2-room apartment. And I had already moved to another house. I did grow up in a 2-room, 1 bedroom with my daughter, my sister, and I, and my parents sleeping in the same bedroom. In the so-called living room was a dining room, a kitchen, everything together with a bed. Anyway, well, at the Navy Yard, I took the exam for the ASTP and passed it. And then I was inducted into the, enlisted into the Army, and I was inducted in July 1st, which was my birthday, 1943. I got the notice, welcome to the Army. At that point then, from there, after going down to Camp Upton, Long Island, for a while, being assigned to KP and whatever they did then, I had to go for basic training in Fort Benning, Georgia, the Infantry Basic Training School, in the heat of the summer, and it was hot then. And after basic training, I was then assigned to Princeton University to study engineering. I says, what could be better? On weekends I could even take the little computer training. I had to say hello to my folks. There she is. So January, February, and March of 1944, I was at Princeton University. As we know, June 7th was D-Day. So at the end of March of 1944, the military closed ASTP throughout the country. And even though I wanted to go to the Air Force, I studied aeronautics at Brooklyn Tech. I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer. That went by the wayside, and we were all shipped on a train across the country to the 104th Infantry Division in Camp Carson, Colorado, called the Timberwolves. So January, February, March, and April of 1944, I was in the infantry as a private in the infantry. And we continued then, that infantry division had been in existence for some time, and the people, those who were in it were already well accustomed to the training, and then they threw us in too. And there was a little bit of anti-Semitism. Whatever. In September then, of 1944, after D-Day, we came across the country and we were in some troop ships. I think of the biggest flotilla that ever went across with the civilians of the Navy ships all around us. And on September 8th, 1944, we landed in Utah Beach and saw all the remnants of the invasion there. Some of our division went through Cherbourg, but our regiment or battalion, I can't remember, landed on the beaches. You want me to go through the whole thing? I can go into a lot of detail.
No.
I could go into detail. Anyway, we fought in Belgium and Holland, and then in Germany, and then on November 18th, 1944, I had to run for a medic because a squad leader had been shot. That's a long story, in the woods. And I found the medics, but they could not go back with me because it's November, late in the afternoon, and it was pitch black. And therefore, none of us could see outside, no lights permitted. Next morning, I went to go back to find my group. Walking through the woods, I slipped on a mine. I yelled for the medics, and I crawled out practically. And from there on, I went to Battalion A station to Paris for operations, and across the Channel to a hospital in England, and from England and later on, in the end of about January of 1945, on a hospital ship back to the United States. And the total, it's been about 1 year from the time I slipped in the mine till I got discharged, with physiotherapy and all the other stuff involved. However, before I got discharged, now, knowing about anti-Semitism, and having felt a little bit of it and sensed a little bit and read about it, I did not want my name to cause a problem throughout the rest of my life. And I decided to change my name before I got discharged, so it would be on my discharge papers. And on a furlough home with my crutches and all, we saw an attorney in Brooklyn that my father knew, and legally we got my name changed. I got all the paperwork, everything. My discharge papers now say Daniel K. for Krupnik, K. Roberts, or Daniel Kenneth Roberts. So that became my new name for my family from then on. And then I applied to Cornell. I applied to Cornell before that, because that's where I wanted to go, and I was accepted, and I can take it from there if you wish.
Okay, you met Betty at Cornell.
I met Betty at Cornell. Betty went to the University of Cincinnati, and after 2 years changed her mind because her mother had gone to Cornell. And I met Betty at Cornell in 1946, I believe, at a function at one of the Jewish fraternity houses, I forget what it was. And we took it from there.
When you finished Cornell, where did you work?
When I finished Cornell, it was also a time when jobs were hard to find. I actually, through the friends of my in-laws, got a job as a draftsman at a very small heating, ventilating, and air conditioning company down in Greenwich Village called Mance Corporation. So I started there on the drafting board. I knew how to do drafting, but I didn't know much about HVAC, except I take some courses as part of my mechanical engineering degree. And I started there. At the same time, I continued on to get an MBA in the evenings at NYU. Oh, I will back up about anti-Semitism. I wanted to get into the Graduate School of Business at Harvard. That was the only one I knew, which was the top of the line then. And so I went for an interview at Harvard with all the documentation I had. At Cornell, I was very successful in engineering. I got 12 Beta Phi Chi, and I was in all kinds of extracurricular activities, so I was in all their honorary societies. And as far as I can see, I should have no problem getting in. At Harvard, the first person who interviewed me was very nice, and he looked at everything and said, "No, I think you look pretty good. Now you have to see Mr. So-and-so." So I walked into this other room with whoever Mr. So-and-so was. Mr. So-and-so has my file there, closed. "Good morning, how are you? Tell me, where'd you grow up? Where'd your parents come from? Any brothers or sisters? What do they do? Tell me about your friends." The questioning he gave me said to me, "You know, you're Jewish, you're not getting in here." That's exactly, but at that point in time, here, how old was I? I didn't start college, of course, until I was 21 because I had to go after the army. And I didn't have the guts to say to him, "What has this got to do with anything?" But, you know, you don't want to have an antagonism when he has to make the decision to get you in. So I was rejected. And I told this to the dean of students at Cornell, and he was as angry as I was about the interview. But that was anti-Semitism. Okay, now we'll back up again. So then, while I was a draftsman at Mance Corporation, I got an MBA at night in marketing and management. And so I started $50 a week. Everybody was working at A&S, as she'll tell you, in the training squad. I lived in Stuyvesant Town, and I got another job at $75 a week at a very large heating, ventilating, and air conditioning company. And they had two names. One was called the Thermodyne Corporation, which handled projects of smaller nature. And then Kirby Saunders, who handled the major big buildings in New York. So I got into their design department there, and then I said I really wanted to get into sales. So after about a year or two, I got into sales on straight commission, no salary, and I did that for 12 years, very successfully. I don't want to go into detail as to why I left, but I left. And I then decided I wanted to go into my own business. What can I do? While we were in Merrick, Long Island, moved to Merrick from Stanford. While I was there, I was very active at the temple. And I was also I was president of the Citizens Committee for Education. I helped my friend get elected to the school board and all this other stuff. So the reason I mention this is because my decision was, how do I know what kind of business to get into? So I said, being an engineer, I got to have myself tested. So I went to the Testing and Advisement Center at New York University, downtown, and I asked if they could give me a battery of tests which will show me what my aptitudes are at the age of 40 with 2 kids, a mortgage, and all that, and they did. And during the interview, I said, how can we measure what these aptitudes are versus different occupations? And so they do all this. And one of the areas of strength was human resources. So that was nice. So as a result of that, I happened to find out about Robert Half through one ad we saw in the paper. I met him, and I had also checked out other businesses. And I said, no, most of them were phony. But I met Robert Half. I said, this is the gentleman. This is a man who I can trust, who I believe in, and within a month I was in business. And that's when I moved up here. I looked around, etc. And then a year later, we moved up to Stanford. And so you want me to continue what happened in my career?
I wanted to back up to how did you begin your involvement with the temple in Merrick?
Oh, that's a good story. Well, after we got married, we lived in Stuyvesant Town for about a year or two. And Betty couldn't take the city. Every weekend we went out to Rockville Center, where she grew up. Her parents were very active in the Reformed congregation in in Rockville Center. Rabbi Gittleson, I don't know if you know the name, Rabbi Gittleson was the rabbi. Very inspiring speaker. And always related his sermons to current events with intelligence. He was also involved in Iwo Jima, and he was the rabbi that gave the talk about what happened at Iwo Jima. So that got me involved with him into the Reform movement. And after a couple of years, we decided, with living here, all our relationships, your Jerry's, Rosalie's, son-in-law. So we said, finally we got to get our own house. So then we moved to Merrick. That's why then I continued with the Reformed congregation in Merrick and took it from there.
Well, now we can jump to Stanford.
Now I jumped to Stanford. When we moved up here, in fact, when I drove up here to look for an office, I heard about the Temple Sinai. Rabbi Silva was the rabbi then. And so I found the temple. I walked in and met his wife. So then we had a contact. So that it was still for that first year up here, I knew about them, but I was still president, but anyway, I was very involved in Merrick. So when we moved up here, we joined the temple immediately, and that's where we've been ever since. And so we moved up here in July of 1967. I opened, 1 year, 1967, in the summer, so that there would be a good time to transition for the kids to go to school. And of course, everybody since then has been calling us on the telephone. Yeah, so that's how we got involved in the temple.
Do you want to make any comments about Sam and Elaine?
Oh yeah, Sam was quite a unique character with his ability to transpose the English language as he spoke into always something a little humorous. Yes, everybody knows. I thought he was terrific. I thought he was terrific. Like, others didn't agree because they want somebody more stern, more straightforward, but I like that kind of personality, yes. So, yes, and then I was on the board here. I became a vice president of the temple. I didn't want to go any further than that. I got enough on my head. And so, yes, I was involved with the temple for many years when I was much younger. And as we all know, those who we grew up with at the temple, many of them are no longer here. And today I don't know most of the people there anymore, except for a few friends.
Okay, let's talk about how you, the Jewish education of your children.
Okay, Betty gets into this much more than I. They went to the school, they went to the Temple Sinai school. Yeah, okay. You know, I'm at my age, like many others, my memory is just not tuned anymore. You know, they started out there, and they even blow the shofar at holidays today. And from there, they also went to some classes at the JCC, and then they are currently at the Bicultural Day School here in Stanford, both of the boys, and they're getting their training there. It is more of an Orthodox orientation that I prefer, but they have a good school on the secular end, so that's where they are until they decide where they're going to make their next step, next move.
Now, I know that, well, first, do you want to take a break, get a glass of water?
No, I'm okay.
Keep going? Okay.
Yeah.
I know you spend a lot of your effort traveling all over the world.
Yeah, like you.
Would you want to pick out any places that had an interesting Jewish content?
Most of the places we visited had no Jewish content. That's most of the world. Because the only one was we visited Israel in a Christmas break that the kids had. I forget what year it is, from school. And it was snowing in Jerusalem. Remember that? And so that was the experience we had with a, obviously, Israeli group. And getting our lectures and seeing all the sights, which was fascinating. Yes, that was the only trip we had. Except for that trip we took with Elder Hostel, which was where we saw, and I gave a lecture on this, on Auschwitz, and we did visit in Czechoslovakia, I can't remember. The other concentration camp in Czechoslovakia, and the one outside of Munich, Germany. So we did see all of that, and took lots of photographs, and SMAS, I gave a talk on the history of the Holocaust with slides and all that.
Do you feel that in your work effort with Robert Half, being Jewish had an influence or not?
No, because many of the other franchisees were Jewish, but not all Jewish, far from it. But there were a number. In fact, a former Reform rabbi took the franchise for Philadelphia, believe it or not, and moved from preaching one thing to preaching another subject. Yeah. There were quite a few Jews there that we knew very well, because every year we had a convention and we met each other, and it was wonderful, really wonderful experiences. Yeah.
Well, before we let you talk on your own, what would you say is the intellectual background you got from growing up in Brooklyn?
Intellectual. Well, you have to recall that the area I grew up in was poor. Of course, I didn't know it was poor, because everyone else was the same character. That was life. I was the only one of my friends who wanted to go to college. The only one who did, in fact, go to college. So that we grew up as friends. We stayed friends throughout our lives. There's still 3 of us left. But I sort of went into a different direction than they did. One moved to Dallas because his father-in-law was a haberdashery salesman, and so he opened a haberdashery store in Dallas, and he had 2 stores. The other one opened a tire store. Friend Marty, I got involved with nursing homes, and he was the director of the nursing home in Brooklyn, and we invested in the nursing home, like all our other friends. And we just went separate ways. We moved to different locations, one in Dallas, one is in Florida, one is in elsewhere there. But there's only 3 of us still left today. And we're very close friends. And we're still in contact with each other all the time. So where shall I go from here?
Did you go to Ebbets Field?
A few times, yes. But we went a lot to Coney Island. Of course, we lived in Bensonhurst, which was just one stop from Coney Island. And so some days in the summertime, all my friends and I would just walk under the elevated line to Coney Island. And that was fun. Other things that I did is I had an Irish friend, the apartment house we originally lived in, and we would go crabbing in, what is it? I can't even think, in the ocean between Coney Island and where the Belt Parkway goes. Belt Parkway didn't exist then. So we'd go crabbing, we caught crabs. I didn't know what to do with them, but his parents loved crabs, so we took them out and they ate the crabs. We had fun. Also, I had good Italian friends who lived across the street. I forget their names now. I forget too many things today. So we were very close friends, and I just remember that in their basement, their father made wine. They'd open up a carpet or something in one of their rooms in the cellar, and we go there with bare feet, jumping all the grapes to make wine. Another man across the street was in the pickle business. But the other thing I guess of importance is that my friends, we played stickball and all the other games in the streets then, so my parents didn't have to worry about getting me a play date like the kids do today. So my friends and I formed a club called, it was the Social Athletic Club. Made our own jackets, and then we met a group of girls who also had a club. So their girls' club and we got very close to each other, and we always went out a lot with each other, went to dances with each other, all of that, and that continued on till I left, you know, until I got my acceptance to Cornell. Then I just flew out. So that was part of it as well. It's hard to remember, you know, you have to say memory is going to be a real problem. It's going to be a real problem. But it was a good life, exciting. Oh, another important thing is that my father, who, when he came to this country, opened up a little print shop, a storefront print shop on 3rd Avenue, which still had an L above it. Came to the Depression, he went out of business, so then he became a typesetter for the rest of his life. My father bought himself a car, an old second-hand Packard, a big Packard with rumble seats. Why was this important? It's because on so many weekends, my cousins, who lived in Borough Park, and we were all kids then, we'd get into my father's old Packard, and of course we'd always argued who would sit in the rumble seat next to the window. We had these debates that they always remind us. And so we'd always take a ride out to what was called the country. What was the country? It was Long Island, was the country. And we'd go to our picnic, and we had wonderful times together with the family. I'll never forget that.
And the Packard had no seatbelts.
What seatbelts? Oh, it's another thing. Before that, my father had an old car, and I remember to get it started, we had to have a crank in there. We had to crank it to get started before the Packard. My father would change his old spark plugs, and I remember he'd take some gasoline out of the gasoline tank and wash them out and change the spark plugs in his old car. So that was interesting too. What other memories? Tough to remember.
Well, you're raising an issue that is a little afield for the Historical Society, but given when you grew up and becoming a mechanical engineering student, you were exposed to hands-on things. You know, and has that, how do you feel that has continued with your children and grandchildren?
Well, put it this way. I recognize there are two sides of the brain. Because my granddaughter Zoe, the brilliant one, wrote an article for her class, and she was only 10 years old, on the brain. On my daughter's side, we have the analytical family, very analytical family, because my grandson Jacob is going to be, I don't know, he takes everything apart, puts it back together so fast, puzzles, he's got the analytical mind. My daughter is the analytical one, she also went to Cornell. Also did my mother-in-law go to Cornell, class of 1921 in Cornell Law. That's another story. My son-in-law is a sales manager, also in the technical devices. So there is one side of the family there. The other side is the artistic. Now, see, I'm half and half. At Brooklyn Tech, I was in the Glee Club. I thought everybody could sing. I knew the words to all the most popular songs of the day. I was the vocalist in the dance orchestra at Brooklyn Tech. And so on my son's side, he's a musician. He has no interest in the technology. He's a musician. And plays his guitar, went into college and got his MBA and whatever. And then he married a woman, my daughter-in-law, Cella, whose short name is Marcella, called Cella, who is a music therapist. He got a degree in music therapy, so he got that family. So on one side, I can see the artistic. The other side, I see the analytical. And I say for myself, I'm half and half. I am both directions. So whether that has some symbolic significance, I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist.
In terms of Judy, of the reform, how do you feel about the reform attitudes toward intermarriage?
So I approve of it. I see nothing wrong with intermarriage. I am very secular in my thinking. When people love each other, I think that's the primary consideration. Put everything else aside. I know that Sam Silver would perform intermarriages. I understand all that wasn't involved, and some, when Sam left, we've had several rabbis at the temple that some did not want to do it, who were interviewed, some would, so that is both ways. And at Temple Sinai, as you know, we have many intermarriages. And those who have converted, my daughter-in-law typically grew up Catholic. She disliked it completely. And she wanted to become a Jew. So she went through all the studies through the UAHC in New York City, and went through the mikveh and the whole bit. She converted to Judaism. And so she's very active in the temple and everything else. So here we have mixed marriage in our own family. We do know, as you know, we're losing a lot of Jews who move out of the Jewish faith, and there's nothing wrong to say why to bring some back into it. You have no control individually of how our life paths go and the experiences we have in life, and they all change our thinking. So to the degree that we can get some to convert to Judaism or even want to attend the temple, that's fine with me.
How many times have you been to Israel?
Pardon?
How often do you?
Oh, we've only been to Israel, I think, maybe twice. Maybe twice. I would have gone with a group recently, but my physical condition said, I can't do it. I can't do it. We went to a little party that they had with a former general from Israeli, developed one of the helicopter squadron, who was retired, was running the trip, and I went to the little dinner, whatever they had here in Stanford, and I wanted to go, but I said to myself, after discussing what's involved, I said, I don't think I can handle it. So the kind of trips we take today are very selective, very selective.
Is there anything that I've left out that you would like to include?
Well, I like to include. Well, Betty and I are involved in an awful lot of activities here in town. I'm involved with the men's club at the JCC, and I've got through all these steps there from membership chairman, program chairman, president, and a program chairman again, but I don't have all the time for him. That one, I belong to the SMAS Senior Men's Club downtown, and that we do an awful lot of artistic work, which went under Betty's direction. She decides which shows we're going to see, and we're pretty active, and I keep myself involved on my computer to the degree that I understand what I'm doing. And a lot of stuff I'd be fascinated to get involved in, but I said, I find it very difficult today to read technical manuals, to read the instructions, and then retain the information. It's getting tough. I don't like it. My physical condition is not what it should be either. So I keep going. I said also, by the way, that the house we're living in today, well, I always dreamt of something like this. And from where I grew up to where this is like two different worlds. But fortunately, a company offered to buy out Robert Half, the franchisor, and all the offices. And I had developed my group into going into the psychology and how I structured it, which I think I did very, very well. So I had partners throughout Canada, and I bought the Chicago office. We had 4 or 5 offices in Chicago. We had 3 offices around here. So, and they were all doing very well. We didn't have the kind of economics we had now, although we went through several recessions, but never like this one. So this company from San Francisco, I sold the offices over time, and all those who were at the offices retired as well, very, very financially secure. And during this process, since we still have an income coming in from a number of offices, I found the property here, found an architect, and Saul Decker, my good friend. We all talked about this a lot. He was here with me so often. In fact, downstairs in the basement here, we have a model of this house that Saul built. I'll show it to you after this session. Of course, he asked me for a copy of the plans, 1/4-inch scale plans, and he made me a model of the house that could be taken apart as a present. Saul was just my best friend up here before he passed away. So we found an architect, young architect. We had a good friend who did the interior decorating, and myself, the construction manager. And I didn't use a general contractor at all, but between the architect and all the meetings, well, we built the house. And with the meetings that we had, Rhoda Schumann, who was our friend, the interior decorator, was passed away recently. We'd meet with the architect because she'd do the interior decoration we wanted. And it was a wonderful experience, once in a lifetime experience. Once in a lifetime. And here we are. It's been about 19 years already. 1920, or maybe, I think I was the CFO in 1991, I think. But I have all the records.
Anything you can think of in terms of the Jewish community in Stanford outside of Sinai?
It's very active. I was involved with the Jewish Family Services for a while. In fact, I was on their search committee for the present director. And was involved with the, I forget what it was called already, Senior Employment Service program that they were trying to set up here. When I was the president of the JCC Men's Club, I was on the board of the JCC at that point in time too. And my family is very much involved with the JCC. My kids are there all the time, and my daughter Jerry is there continuously. And she's involved, of course, with Sisterhood. She's co-president of Sisterhood now at Temple Sinai. And, you know, we follow all the holidays. We have the Passover here. Oh, another thing I didn't mention. which is, I don't know what the relevance is, but however, in 1982, we had a Cornell trip called the Passage of the Tsars, where we went up through the Black Sea to Odessa and up the river, and the last stop was Kiev. Well, this is quite a story, and I don't know to what degree you want to go into this, but in Kiev, and it was very emotional, we found my father's sister. Now this is a 1 hour story, so I don't want to go into that. 1 hour, we found my father's sister. With the help and guidance of another couple who we're still friendly with, who spoke Yiddish. Which I could, a little bit, but not much. We found my father's sister in this old, I call it old rundown apartment building downtown Kiev. And before we left, just in case we could find her, I had my father's cousin, who was still, we're still very close. She lives, well, she's 90s and blind now. Wrote me a letter in Russian and in English, introducing me in case we found her. Because all the years since my father left his family, first my uncles, my aunt, my father's brother who came with him, my aunt had continued the correspondence when she died. Raya Klein is the name of the woman. Raya continued to correspond with my father's sister. So she knew the address, all that. And before we left, I went, in New York, I got a map of Kiev, I went to a little more, a lot of detail. Anyway, we found my sister, I showed her the letter, she read the first paragraph, and everybody burst out crying and hugging. Because she lived in this old apartment house, which was on the second floor. Her name was Krupnik, Essia Krupnik, and lived in a a hall with 3 rooms next to it. The old term for it. It's a railroad flat, I guess. And she had 1 room. Other people had other rooms. She had 1 room at the end, and that's where we found her. And it was very emotional that evening, as I said. She also at that point ran out, was right here, and another sister came in. I didn't know it even existed. A second sister. And we were there, it was about 8 o'clock at night when we were there. And later on that evening, a young lady came in, this is the key, named Mira, M-I-R-A, Mira. Mira was in her 20s then, and she took us back to the boat. It's another long story. She took us back to the boat. Anyway, Mira then got married later on, and in I can't remember the dates anymore, 1992 was it? 1990? Anyway, we got into this country. We brought Mira. We brought to this country Mira, her husband Alex. Mira's daughter was 3 years old. Alex's mother, and Mira's mother, who was my first cousin, who I never knew, and my father's sister. Brought them all over to the United States. And that's from here, it's a very, very long, complicated story. But Mira's still here. She has her house, which I helped to buy in Brooklyn. She's very successful in what she's doing. And they're here with us on Passover all the time. She's very accomplished in her field. She taught pattern making and stuff over in Kiev. And she has a good job in New York with a big company. Really, that was direct mail. Most of these dress companies disappeared. And her company is getting smaller and smaller, but she has jewelry on the side so that at the sisterhood meeting coming up, she will be one of those who will display jewelry for sale very shortly. Good night. So she's part of our family now, and I'm the father. Really, that's what it amounts to. I'm the father for them. guide, advisor.
You've pretty much covered questions I have, and you've covered Pesach. So we've passed over.
Yeah, maybe it was too much, I don't know.
So I think at this point, I have to thank you for participating in the Oral History Archive, and we'll let the machine stop.
Okay, may I also know?
Good morning, Betty. My name is Lee Fanwick. I'm here to interview for you from the Sanford Jewish Historical Society for our Oral History Project. And I want to thank you for doing this with me. Today is November 16, 2009, and our cameraman is Julie Reitman.
Wait a minute, okay,
Let's
go.
go back a little way. I know your parents were born in this country. They were really Yankees, but where did their parents come from? You
My
remember?
father's parents were born in this country too. In fact, my father's family came to Charleston, South Carolina, and his great-grandfather was a president of the first Reformed temple in the country in Charleston, South Carolina, Beth Elohim. And I think his mother was also born in this country, but I really do not know. I know very little about Dad's family, unfortunately. My mother's family came from Germany, and they were both born in Germany, and I believe, though, that they met in San Francisco, but then they moved to New York. So both parents were born in New York City.
What made them all come to this country? Have you any idea?
I have no idea. I mean, with my father's family coming up, father's family coming in, well, that was in the early 1800s. The family went through the Civil War living in Charleston, South Carolina. But they were not, I didn't know enough to ask the right questions about the family history. And that was the problem. So I really know very little about them and why they came. I believe my mother's parents came over for financial reasons to earn a better living. This was the land of milk and honey. But they were not persecuted in Germany. So I think it was for business opportunity.
Did they ever talk about, you say they came around the Civil War time, did they ever talk about that? Did you ever hear anything?
I hear nothing from my father's family. And when I've tried to get in touch with my father's family, I get no response. On the ones in Charleston, there's only one really that's left, and I think she's got a memory loss, because when I tried to get some parts of the remaining family together last time I was down in Charleston, she forgot about it, so we only had dinner with them. And she seemed like a little out of touch, so I have no idea. The last reunion of the Williams family was in, about 1980, so somewhere around there. And we swore we'd get together again, and we never have.
I know your mother was a graduate of Cornell Law.
Yeah,
She was quite an interesting lady, your mother.
Mother went to Cornell on a Regents Scholarship for New York State, and graduated in 4 years as a lawyer, and instead of law school those days, they clerked for 2 years. So for 2 years she clerked, and then in 1925 she married Dad, who she had met originally in religious school at Rhodes of Sholem in New York.
Board of Sholem was Orthodox?
No, Reform.
Reform.
There's only been Reformed temples in our lives, that's all. Which is a long, long time. Dad was accepted to Cornell, but he went to Columbia because his mother got ill and he was afraid to leave New York City. So there's always been a conflict between Cornell and Columbia. They both graduated in 21. He as an electrical engineer, and she as a lawyer. And she practiced in Brooklyn after clerking for a little till they got married. And once they got married, she was, I don't think she worked after that. I never said, but she did work once we were growing up. I mean, she had one client that she rewrote his will every year. We called it Will's Will, and that gave her enough money so that she was able to travel all over the world with the International Federation of Women Lawyers. So she was a liberated woman from way back.
She was ahead of her time.
Dad's senior year was financed by IT&T, All American Cable and Radio. He went with them directly from college and never left them. He was the only Jew, kept on during the Depression, and though he had other opportunities in life, he felt responsible, and he's worked for the same company till he died in 1957, at the age of 57.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Rockville Center, Long Island. I was born in New York, moved to Brooklyn, and as soon as my sister was born, 5 years later, we moved to Rockville Center. And I basically consider that because I don't remember too much of New York or Brooklyn.
Are there a lot of Jews in Rockville Center?
There was a growing number. There was a growing number. There was an Orthodox temple that was very small. The conservative temple was the big temple, and then our temple, Central Synagogue of Nassau County, was formed, maybe just a year or two before we moved there in 1936. And it grew, and more and more people moved. It was one of Levitt's first projects besides Great Neck. He built Strathmore and Rockville Center, and quite a few Jewish families moved in there. I don't say it was overly Jewish. All my friends were not Jewish. But it was a very good background because I went to the Methodist church, I went to the Catholic church. We were all friendly, and the Catholics were not allowed to go to the temple.
Did you encounter any anti-Semitism in Rockville Center?
Not really. I didn't feel it.
Not in high school or in elementary school?
No. I did not feel that I was attacked at all. I was attacked more by another Jew who moved to town, picked what friends she wanted, and I was not on the list because I had been popular, and so I was sort of pushed down to the bottom. And my high school days were not my happiest. I wasn't happy till I got to college.
Was there much of a Jewish center and much of a Jewish presence in Rockville Center?
You went to your own temple,
Went to your own temple.
and that was all. I had a youth group that I went to when I was a junior and senior in high school, but it was not in Rockville Center, it was in the next town in Baldwin. And so all the people that I knew were from Freeport, Baldwin, and not necessarily from Rockville Center.
Your family was not particularly religious? You didn't have a religious upbringing at all?
Well, we went to temple. I went to religious school. At the beginning, before we built the building, our religious school was in Freeport and went every single week. I was confirmed. I didn't know what a bagel was until World War II, when our Greek bakeries brought in some bagels, and the men would go down Sunday morning to get bagels. I didn't know what Nova lox was. I only knew belly lox. When you got lox, it was smoked salmon, it was salty. We never observed kashrut, but we always had Passover from the Reform Haggadah, and we had big family parties twice a year. Once for my sister's birthday in November and once for mine in April. and family would come from New York, New Jersey, and there was socially, we had distant cousins we found when we came to Rockville Center of my father's family. And Sundays we'd always go to one house or another of this family group, and cocktails, and I was allowed to have a little bit each time. And it was family, but even that we've lost now.
You mentioned Rabbi Gittleson was a great influence.
Absolutely.
Tell me about him.
He's a wonderful
How was
man.
he influential to you?
He was a warm rabbi. He enjoyed working with us as children. Right away, I think from the age of 9, I would light candles on Shabbat at services. The boys would say the blessing over the wine. We were involved in temple activities right from the beginning. And religious school was wonderful. I said I was confirmed at the age of 15. Out of my confirmation class of 8 boys and 8 girls, only 2 of the boys were bar mitzvahed, and we had never heard of bat mitzvah. So we were, completely reformed when it comes to that. And at the beginning, we even had a Christmas tree. Because in Germany, the Christmas tree was not so much for Christ, it was for the birth of winter. And it was a winter solstice thing. So we had the little tree that we'd have every year. We exchanged Christmas gifts. We didn't start Hanukkah. Until the 40s. It was the first time we had heard of Hanukkah, besides in religious school. So it was a very Reformed background. Reformed Judaism today is not what it was when I was growing up.
It's taken a complete turnaround.
Reformed Judaism has become conservative, and Orthodox have become more conservative. We've sort of hit the middle ground.
Do you think you missed anything because it was so reformed, or do you feel that becoming more Jewish, how do you feel the difference?
I don't feel any difference.
You don't feel any different?
No. I saw the other religions, I went to them, and I liked what I had. And the only other religion I would even think of following besides Judaism is Buddhism.
Why?
Because it's such a peaceful religion. And we're certainly not peaceful these days.
Tell me about your years at Cornell. That must
Well, I
have been
didn't
a
start
big
at
Jewish
Cornell.
influence.
I didn't start at Cornell.
Oh, you didn't start at Cornell?
No, I heard nothing but Cornell all my life from my mother. And my marks weren't that great either because Spanish and French took me right down to the bottom. I was only math and science oriented right from the kid. And I wanted to go where I wanted to go, so I put Cornell on the bottom of my list of where I wanted to go. So of course I was turned down. So I looked, I knew I wanted home economics because I had a professional mother, professional father. I wanted to be home with my kids as my mother was not. So I took home economics knowing that I was interested in textiles and clothing, and I looked up other schools that would do it, and I found the University of Cincinnati. And I went out to the University of Cincinnati, and I had a wonderful year my first year. I had a boyfriend, my roommate and I started the Hillel chapter, which was surprising that a university with Hebrew Union College across the street had no Hillel chapter. And I became very active and I got a straight A average. Sophomore year, my boyfriend and I broke up. I had done everything, I had been in everything, I was bored silly, I applied to Cornell and I got in as a transfer student. And I went to Cornell, also went to New York State. Cornell was a state school, home economics. So my whole fees were $75 a semester. But yet with room and board, it cost more than to send me to the University of Cincinnati with room and board and the tuition. But I was lucky because my first week at Cornell, I went to a mixer for transfer students and I met Dan. And though we were just friends, and I knew that I couldn't expect to see him more than once every 2-3 weeks, we started to go together, and I knew from my sorority sisters when he was going with somebody else. I kept track of him. And eventually he got out in February of 50, and I graduated in June. He said that, so long, it was nice knowing you. And next thing I know, Valentine's Day, I'm in the infirmary with mono, and I get a bunch of flowers. And comes my birthday in April, he comes up with my parents. And by the end of that summer, we were engaged.
Was there an active Hillel in Cornell when you went there?
There was a Hillel, but it wasn't active. I went a couple of times. I loved the rabbi, Rabbi Goldfarb. He was a marvelous guy. But there was really nothing that drew me to it. I was active in my sorority. I became president of the sorority, even
What
though
was
I
your sorority?
Sigma Delta Tau. And I had no interest in going out of my way to join the Hillel activities. Today's Hillel chapter there is much better, but it wasn't then. So it was a Jewish sorority. I dated only Jews from the Jewish fraternities around. And any religious life I had at home. I never went to temple at Cornell. I didn't do that till I came home and got active back in the temple again, in which I grew up.
What brought you to Stanford?
Dan's business. As Dan said in his, we lived in Merrick, and he opened the business, and he commuted till one day, as he was president of the temple in Merrick, he would leave me the list of the applicants in our personnel agency that would have to be called, and he got stuck on the bridge at one time and I had to get him off, and if it was bad weather he had to stay at the good old Hotel Hazleton here in Stanford, or the Roger Smith if he could get in, and I said, you know, you're not going to last at this rate. So we answered a New York Times ad, Sunday ad on Monday, put a deposit on Tuesday, and spent the next 6 months going back to Merrick trying to sell the house there while our kids were at camp, Eisner. And that was it.
What kind of a camp did your kids go to in the summer?
Reformed Jewish Congregation Camp, Eisner. Our daughter Jerry went to horseback riding camp up in Buffalo, run by a guy who lives here in Reitman. Eric went to a camp I thought would bring out some sports in him, near Butternut ski area, which he enjoyed a little bit, but then he found a music camp in Hartwick, New York, and he went there for 2 years. So they had a varied life except for one summer when Dan decided that we could, if I went as a counselor to a camp in Beckett, Massachusetts, I could teach modern dance and swimming, and the kids could go free. So we spent that summer, a disastrous summer, at a new camp run by a guy who didn't know how to run a camp. And we left before it was over, because we couldn't take it anymore.
The Reformed Jewish camp that you mentioned, was there a big presence of religious observance there?
Friday nights they had to wear white. They had services outdoors mostly, unless it was raining. Our daughter especially enjoyed some of the counselors that they had there that are now Reform rabbis. Jeff Klepper, Rami Arian, Jeff Klepper wrote the Sim Shalom prayer. They enjoyed it very much, and that's Friday nights, and Saturday activities were limited. but they enjoyed it.
That was a big influence in Jerry's life, you think?
I think she enjoyed the horseback riding camp more.
What?
I think she enjoyed the horseback riding camp more. There she pleaded with me, can you bring the horse home for the winter? Sure, till I found out that each horse produces 25 pounds of manure a day. And I was living in a house on Cascade Road, and I didn't know how I would possibly get rid of that kind of thing. And I said, no, you can't bring Snickers home for the winter.
You belonged to Temple Sinai when Rabbi Silver was there. What was your impression of him?
Mm-hmm. I did not like Sam as a rabbi. Had I not been so steeped in Reform Judaism, I would have left the temple.
Why didn't you like him?
I didn't feel there was any warmth behind him. I didn't like the way he interviewed people that, all the sensational people he got, like Sam Levinson and Bishop Sheen and all those things. This was not to me what I liked, and I don't know, the affinity wasn't there.
He's a big presence in Stanford.
Oh yes. And I firmly agree with his idea to intermarry, because so many intermarriages do land up where the children are brought up as Jewish. Not in my family, but it's happened.
What organizations have you been active here in Stanford?
Well, I started out in National Council of Jewish Women because my mother had been very active in National Council of Jewish Women. Carol Selzberg was president at the time, and half the women were pregnant. And I was afraid I'd catch the disease. And I had nothing in common with them. I was working, and at that point I was working just about full time, so that it was difficult. I joined Sisterhood at Temple Sinai, and I made friends through Sisterhood, but I found that as a newcomer to Stanford, I wasn't IBM, who stuck to themselves. I wasn't a native, who stuck to themselves. And I was sort of in between. But we've managed over the years, even when working, to make one new friend every year. And we developed friends that we've had over the years here. And I wouldn't move anywhere else. All my friends are here. I do have a few friends left from Merrick that I see, but this is my life now, and I love Stanford.
You've seen some different changes in Stanford.
Oh boy, yes. When we moved here in '67, it was a village. It was a town, a small town. It's now a city.
My son used to call it a sleepy little town.
It's no longer a sleepy little town. I very seldom, now that I live so far north, I very seldom go downtown. Unless I have to. I like it up here in the country. I think I'm an hour from New York to see all the shows and things, but I'm an hour back home here where it's quiet, and I have my deer to keep me company.
How do you feel about your grandchildren? They're going to an Orthodox day school compared to what you grew up with.
I'm not happy at all. I think growing up as I did, with children of all religions, children of, well, we didn't have too many blacks at that point. We had a big Italian population. I feel that's the world we live in, and I feel they're missing out on that. They have to have play dates in Fairfield and Weston because they're the kids that go to bicultural. They don't have kids around the neighborhood. It's not real life. And I don't feel that at least a third, if not half, of their education is in Hebrew. I don't think that that's necessary here.
How does your daughter feel about this?
She says it's the best school around. She's more active in what they're learning, and the other school that she would consider as king, and she says that's so much more expensive, and she doesn't even know whether my oldest grandchild would even get into King. So I'm not happy with it, but it's their decision, not mine.
Right. Are your children involved locally in Jewish things?
Jerry is president of Sisterhood of Temple Sinai, co-president. She is on the PTA board, I believe, of Bicultural. She's at the JCC every day in this new exercise program they've got now, exercise and losing weight. She's there by 8 o'clock in the morning, and she's very active there. So my son-in-law is active in Scouts. He's a Scout leader. So they're active in the community, and it's good to see it.
What about Eric and Shella? Do they have a Jewish presence where they live?
They had belonged to a temple out there.
What town do they live in?
They live in Highlands Ranch, which is 20 miles south of Denver, and they were going to a temple in Denver, and somehow they dropped out of that temple, and they're in some sort of a Havarat now, or maybe it's not even a Havarat, it's more like a Chabad. I'm not that happy with it, but it's close by, and Zoe is getting ready to be bat mitzvahed Columbus Day weekend in 2010, because girls can be done at 12. And they do observe Hanukkah. They do light candles for Shabbat. My daughter-in-law, as a convert to Judaism, tends to be a little bit more observant
That's usually the
than,
case.
than my daughter. But they did go to services on the holidays at this Chabad.
Did she have a Reform conversion?
Yeah. I believe, oh God, I don't remember the name of the rabbi at Central Synagogue in New York. Did the conversion, and then she went to the mikveh and did the whole procedure.
Are you pleased with her that she converted?
Oh yeah, I'm very glad. She said that she had been a lapsed Catholic, and I thought her mother was exceptional, that before they got married, she went to the rabbi in Saratoga Springs to find out about a Jewish wedding because she didn't want to embarrass her daughter.
She what?
She didn't want to embarrass her daughter
Oh,
at the wedding. And of course, in the middle of the wedding, my mother, God bless her, said something, oh, I think the rabbi mentioned something about Stephen Wise, and my mother popped up, oh yes, Stephen Wise married us, in the middle of the ceremony. But they're very happy out there.
how many children do they have?
2. They have Zoe, who is 11, and they have Lily Rose, who is probably 7. We really don't know because she's adopted from China. And the date that they gave us for her birth was definitely wrong because she was bone tested over here. And they said that she was at least 6 to 8 months older than what they had said. So we arbitrarily gave her a birthday of June 1st because nobody's birthday was in June. And so they're both in school out in Highlands Ranch.
You've done a lot of traveling. Have you been to any interesting Jewish sites in your travels?
Besides Israel, the most Jewish sites we've been to are the concentration camps in Poland and Czechoslovakia. The temple, I don't give much hope for the resurgence of Judaism in Poland, except in Warsaw they have a Reform temple now, and we were speaking to one young man who was converting to Judaism, which is amazing. because all our guides over there were very knowledgeable about Judaism, but were not Jewish. And this young man is going through conversion. Unfortunately, there's no mikveh in Warsaw, so he'll be dunked in the river as a place of the mikveh, and in the age of mid-20s, he's going to have to be circumcised. But he's determined to be a Jew, which is amazing. And of course, we've been to Israel 2 times, and almost went a third, but didn't. But we've been to over 100 countries, and I will admit that we haven't gone synagogue hunting when we've been in Asia especially. Kind of hard to find.
You think there's anything we left out that you'd like to talk about?
Just that Stanford's a wonderful place.
Well, I'm glad you're here then with us, because you love it so well. Well, Betty, I want to thank you for allowing us to interview you. And your interview will become an integral part of our oral history in the archives. I want to thank you.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.